Thank you very much to all of you for responding to the invitation to come here. It would have been nice if there were some young people from all the parishes, but slowly I guess the word will get around. So please make it your mission today not only to glean and take with you as much information as you can about this very important subject, but also be prepared to pass on some of the good news to other people. And I don't say the word good news lightly. This is an incredible time for our Australian and New Zealand Diocese of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, because in the past, the closest that we've ever managed to achieve in the sense of religious training or theological, if you could even use such a word, education, was either through discussions held by priests in individual parishes, and of course spiritual topics that have been brought up at youth conferences, but of course they're never at that level that you would want to have academically. And some years ago in Sydney, so some theological lessons or lectures were presented over a course of probably a year and a half, I think, and they were quite serious, and they were regular, weekly, I think, with some of the clergy in Sydney being assigned to make presentations each week, and even the bishop, I believe, did as well. But the problem with that is, it was in Sydney, and so if you were serious, first of all, you had to be committed even in Sydney to make the time to regularly attend, and secondly, if you didn't live in Sydney, then you were unlikely to be able to persevere for very, very long. When I was a younger man and studied and received a secular education, I believe that at that time, if I had an opportunity such as this, to be studying a university degree and to swap some of my subjects like letter writing or PR or something like that for a theological subject, I think that would have just been magnificent. But there was nothing like that at the time. And now, through the efforts of the Diocesan Council, and spearheaded and mainly through the energy of Father Peter Hill here from South Australia in Adelaide, this has finally almost come to fruition. The idea is that if everything is on target, that in July, finally the first courses will begin. Are we on target?
Yes, okay. Yes, it's all going to happen.
And of course we're talking about undergraduate, and then, of course after that we'll be working towards postgraduate and higher, so that will all depend on God's will. It should be said that prior to this, the only truly theological course of high standing that one could do here was the Greek one at St Andrew's College in Redfern. And so it's now wonderful that there can be one with a sort of a Slavic flavour as well, the Hellenic and Slavic. And surely that's a good mix somewhere down the line. So, Father Peter, thank you for all of the effort you've put in thus far. And does everyone know Father Peter? He's a parish priest down at Adelaide, and then there's all these other details of his life that I'm hoping he will share with you about how you came to be Orthodox yourself and so on, and the kind of academic studies that you're involved in. He also speaks some weird languages that no one else in the world speaks. But apparently there's some documents that are written in those languages.
Well, with an introduction like that, I guess I have to say something now, don't I? I wasn't going to talk about myself, but yes, I came to the church with my wife, Matushka, and our 3 children, who are all well and truly grown up now, over 20 years ago, at the end of 1998. We were baptised as a family. We were living down in Tasmania at the time, and I remember Father Michael Protopopov came down, and the only place we could find was the the local Church of Christ had a big indoor baptismal pool. And we sort of, in Tasmania, you sort of needed that because outside was really not an option, you know, you'd be chipping away at the ice or something. And so we all got baptised as a family together, and that was a very happy day, and that was the start of our life in the church. Up until then, I'd been a minister in the Presbyterian Church. So I went to the Presbyterian Theological College. I did the diploma course there, which was a 3-year full-time course. And we didn't quite have all the options in those days about bachelor's courses in Australia. And I had studied at the University of Adelaide, and I went on then to the University of Melbourne. And in fact, the interesting thing is it wasn't just an academic journey for me, it was a spiritual journey, because when I went to Melbourne, I had decided I was going to do Old Testament studies, because there aren't many Old Testament scholars around the place. There are a few, but not many. The church is always short of Old Testament scholars. And so I charged off to do advanced Hebrew studies at University of Melbourne. And my professor was a wonderful man, Takemitsu Muraoka, who was the first Japanese person in the world to get a scholarship to go to Israel. He did his PhD in Israel and was an amazing philologist and Semitic scholar. And he's still alive. He's written what is really in my view, it's a bit controversial, but in my view is now the standard lexicon to the Septuagint. That was a work of many, many years, which he undertook. But anyway, I went to do Hebrew there, and he was very kind. He got me in because I wasn't really quite qualified for what I wanted to do, but he got me in. And I had to work very, very hard the first year indeed with them. And then one day he said, "Oh, Mr. Hill," he said, "you must do a cognate subject, cognate language." And I said, what would you suggest, Professor? And he said, "You should do Syriac." And I hadn't really heard much about Syriac, and Syriac's a dialect of Aramaic, Christian Aramaic, if you like, that was spoken across the Middle East for 1,000 years, and in which many, many documents indeed were written. Many are awaiting editing and investigation. And many of our great fathers, like St. Ephraim the Great, or St. Ephraim the Syrian, St. Isaac of Nineveh, St. Aphrahates, the Persian sage, and so on, these men all wrote in Syriac. So I started studying Syriac, first of all because I thought it would help me with my Hebrew. But after all, I became fascinated with it, and there were all these Christian documents, and I started thinking, I want to look at these and understand these, and my attention turned to Syriac. And so I ended up doing both my master's and my doctorate in Syriac, and I had a particular interest in the New Testament, and the text of the New Testament and how it's been transmitted down through the centuries, and especially the Syriac versions. So that's where I ended up. But along the way, I had to read the Church Fathers, because, in fact, my master's subject was a medieval Syriac commentator, Dionysius Bar Salibi. And I did a translation of one of his commentaries and an introduction and all sorts of things you do. And I had to start reading the Fathers. And here I'd come out of this Protestant background, and I was sort of told, we don't really worry too much about that stuff, when I'd been back in my Protestant theological college. And I thought, I really need to find out about these fathers and find out a lot more about them than what I'd learned in theological college. And so I started reading them. And then I started realising that the Christianity of which they were speaking and the Christianity of which I was a part were poles apart. That there was a really profound difference between the way our faith was expressed, both in terms of the way dogma was expressed and the way we worshipped. I remember struggling with things like the government of the church, baptismal regeneration, issues like that. Funnily enough, not some of the really bigger issues that would pop up later, but issues like that became really important for me. So, and then the University of Melbourne had a wonderful travel scheme, so I spent a lot of time going to the Middle East. And in total, I think, between 1995 and 2009, I spent about 2 years of my life hanging around Syria. And I kept on bumping into these Orthodox people. I wasn't visiting Orthodox people in Australia. I knew nothing about the Orthodox in Australia, to be honest. But I kept on bumping into these Orthodox people in the Middle East. And of course, in my Protestant myopia, I thought when I first went there, these will be all it'll be dead traditional type stuff. These people, they'll just be formal Christians. They need to be evangelised. They need to be won to Christ. As a good Protestant, that's what I thought. But when I got there, I found these people had a dynamic, that they had a love for Christ that put me to shame of it, and a zeal for Christ in the midst of an Islamic society. And that the love between Christians was really quite palpable. That was my experience anyway. And so I had to start thinking about things very, very deeply indeed. And the Holy Spirit started working in my heart, and I started to change. And I don't want to take a long time talking about it, but I must tell you one story, and that is that I went to, I think it was about, I can't remember which trip it was, but this would be getting towards about 96, 97. And I went to stay in a Syriac Orthodox monastery, so they're the non-Chalcedonian church. And in eastern Turkey, and I only found out later they shouldn't have even had me there. They were actually breaking the law, letting me stay there. But I stayed there. And there were a couple of young Australian boys there, and they said, we were talking about religion and our faith, and they said, "You're a very strange Protestant minister." They said, "You should be Orthodox." And I sort of laughed, and I said, "No." And then, funny enough, I went on somewhere else, and this happened again. People kept on saying these words to me exactly. "You should be Orthodox. You're not Protestant, you're Orthodox." And this happened to me about 3 or 4 times. I won't go into all the details now. But finally I was in Egypt, and I was on the Red Sea, in the Red Sea monastery, the monastery of St Anthony the Great. And I'd sort of hitched a ride out there from Cairo, and I had to get back to Cairo, and there was a whole busload of Coptic young people. And they were going back to Cairo. And I said, "Can I get a lift with you?" So they, "Of course." And I got talking. There's a very nice young married woman behind me sitting on the bus, and we got talking. She spoke very good English. And she said exactly the same thing to me again. She said, we got talking, she said, "You should be Orthodox." And I laughed. And what did she say to me? She looked at me and she said, "With God, all things are possible." Simple as that. And it was like an arrow in my heart. And I'd also on that trip stayed at Balamon Monastery in Lebanon, and they'd given me the address of Father Michael Harper in London, because I was going to London on my way home, and to look at some manuscripts, of course. But I was in London, and I went to the Antiochian Cathedral, and for the first time in my life, I heard part, not all of the Divine Liturgy, but part of the Divine Liturgy in English. And suddenly I thought, yes, this is possible. I hadn't thought it was possible before that. I thought, no, it's culture, ethnicity, language. It's all against me. How can I make this change? And Father Michael was wonderful. I went and shared lunch with them. They had sort of a catechetical class after the service, and we sat down and talked about things. And I realised finally, meeting this man who'd converted from the Anglican Church and come to the Orthodox Faith, that it was possible. And then I had a problem, because I made up my mind then in London, yes, I have to do this. With God, all things are possible. And then I thought, I only had one problem, that was my wife. I had to go home and tell her. And I sort of hadn't been very happy in the Presbyterian Church, and we'd chopped and changed around the place, and the last thing she wanted to hear from me was about more change, So I got home, and Father Michael had given me a book he'd written about his conversion. And I came home and told her, I said, I met Michael Harper in London, and she was really impressed, because Michael Harper had been a very well-known name in the circles in which she'd moved in our Protestant days, and before we were married. And she said, I must read that. And I said, yes, please do. And she read this book about how he converted to Orthodoxy. And, she turned around and she said to me after she read the book, she said, "We've got to do this. We've got to do this." And in fact, my wife has been more faithful and steadfast and unflinching in her devotion to the church than I have been at times. I can tell you that. Where I felt like at times giving up or throwing in the towel or everything else, Matushka has never given up. And she's always been my little tower of strength and saying to me, "We go on, we keep on, what's it all been for? This is what it's about." And so that's my story. And so that's sort of a nice segue then into St. Cyril and Methodius Orthodox Institute, because we're not just about providing an academic experience, but we're about providing an academic experience that is framed by genuine spiritual experience. So, if we have the first slide. Why has it been founded? Well, excuse me, I will sit round to the side a little bit because it's a bit hard. Why have we been founded? That's a long way away, isn't it? I'm sorry the print's a bit small. To sum it up, we had a number of considerations when we started talking about theological training and Christian education, higher Christian education in Australia, in terms of our church. One, of course, was naturally theological education, the training of young men, and not so young men, some older men as well, for ordained service, whether as deacons or as priests. And, the options have been very limited in Australia. There has been St Andrews, but that hasn't been an option for many of our people over the years, for all sorts of reasons, geographical reasons being one of them, but other reasons as well. And traditionally, our students have gone to Jordanville to train for the priesthood, but that too is a difficult option for many men, especially if they're married and have families. And it entails a great deal of financial cost. So we thought, and so over the years we have sort of tended to have quite a few men come into the clergy who haven't had any formal training. And it's not to reflect on anybody, because our clergy do a wonderful, wonderful job. But nonetheless, at times you can see that things could be so much better and so much more could have been achieved had our clergy had that training, or had all of our clergy had that sufficient level of training. So that was one concern. How can we provide an alternative pathway for students who can't get to Jordanville or to another Orthodox seminary? But then there was also the question of what do we do about clergy who have been to Jordanville or have been to an Orthodox seminary or somewhere else, but then they want to go on and do some further study, or what about continuing professional development for them? And what about clergy like me who come in from other backgrounds, and we need some sort of bridging course, some sort of help to make that change in our thinking and our orientation theologically from our former background to the fullness of the Orthodox Church. So all those considerations were there. But then we were thinking, well, Christian education is not just about educating men to become clergy, as important as that is. It's also about educating everyone. All of us are called to bring every thought captive to Christ, aren't we? That's what the Apostle says. You bring every thought captive to Christ. All of us are to strive to be workmen approved of God. And in this day and age, we need Christian people, not just clergy, but Christian people, men and women, young and old, to be well equipped and to well understand their faith. We need people to be communicators and advocates and leaders. We need people to work in parishes, but also people to be salt and light in the wider society, because they have a good grasp and understanding of the Christian faith. And of course, as we look around us and we look at the Roman Catholics, we look at the Protestant communities, we see they've done an enormous amount of work in this area. And they have all sorts of programs going in their colleges, in youth work and leadership and communication and media, as well as traditional type biblical study courses and theological study courses. And in the Orthodox world, we have almost nothing in this country like that. So we wanted, and in fact in the Orthodox world generally, there's not an awful lot like that. So we wanted to pave the way, as it were, and to have that vision of having an educational institute that would be able to equip people across the board to live their faith and to articulate their faith and to share their faith with others. So next one. So the institute is set up as a company. It's a charitable company, limited by guarantee. His Eminence Metropolitan Hilarion is our chairman. His Grace Bishop George, our vice chairman. And you can see the other directors are listed there. We still have to get a couple of them formally listed with ASCII. We've been having a couple of headaches for that. Father Gabriel is one of our directors, our man in Brisbane. So, and we've been very, very grateful for their wisdom and support and leadership in this very difficult time of getting things going. And I guess I have to say, occasionally people ring up and say, well, I contacted you about this and I haven't heard about this or I haven't heard about that. And, well, there's a lot to do just at the moment. We're still having to develop many, many things in terms of procedures and policies and that type of thing. But we're getting there. So have the next slide. So let me talk a bit about our approach, because I think this is important. The first thing I want to say is that the Institute is thoroughly traditional in its approach, by which I mean the fullness of the Orthodox faith, and only the Orthodox faith is what we teach. And we are committed to that in our constitution, and we are certainly committed to that in our practice, and the board is committed to that. Everyone's on the same page about that. So the fact that we're doing something a bit different does not mean that we've abandoned traditional orthodoxy. Please don't think that for a moment. The basis, the content of everything we do is the fullness of the Orthodox faith. That's point number one. Next point, if we have the next slide. I'll come back to ACD in a moment. The next thing I want to say, though, is that our approach is also, as well as being traditional, it's engaged and it's practical. So by engaged, I mean we want to have a teaching and learning environment in which students really are engaged in their learning and take responsibility for their learning. So it's not the old sort of rote learning process that has sometimes dominated theological study. It's rather getting people, yes, there's a body of knowledge to learn, but helping students to engage with that body of knowledge in different ways and to apply that knowledge. And that's where it becomes practical. So we place a great premium upon practical education in what we're doing. That means that if you're studying, that in nearly every unit we will do, except for a few sort of core units, in every other unit we do, there will be some practical component in it. So if you're studying iconography, we'll get in an iconographer, or you might go and learn how to paint an icon, or you might help curate an icon exhibition. If we're studying discipleship and what it means to live as a disciple for Christ, you might find yourself helping out at a soup kitchen, or working with the people on the street, the poor and the needy, or getting involved with some sort of charity or mission, or perhaps helping out with the elderly people in the parish, or perhaps being assigned to a priest in a parish for some field work to help out in some practical ways. So we want our students to learn by doing, as well as learn by thinking and reading. So it's cognitive, but it's also constructive in the sense that we want you to learn by doing. And we want you to learn how to put what you're learning into practice. So it's not just about stuffing your head full of knowledge and then hoping that somehow it works its way out in the rest of your life. It's about giving you the tools and the skills to apply that knowledge to everyday life. Whether that means on one track, in the clergy track, it's going to be applied within a parish ministry situation, or whether in the faith and life track, in the general track of men and women who are going into the clergy but are studying for interest and for other reasons, that you're going to be skilled to apply that knowledge and use that knowledge in the workplace, at home, in your parish, in society.
I'll just try to make it bigger.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That might help. It is a bit tiny, isn't it? So you'll see, yes, we mentioned there's supervised field education and opportunities. So there's going to be lots and lots of that sort of thing happening. And Father, that brings me to the next slide. We're just going to try and make it a bit bigger, I think. Because it does seem a bit smaller than it seemed in Melbourne, I don't know.
We're a smaller city, we can't afford to.
Oh, that's even smaller. There we go. That's getting bigger. Is that bigger? I think it is fractional. That looks a bit bigger, Father.
A bit bigger?
Oh, go to the text slides. I think they
Yeah, that's a bit bigger. Okay, so the next one, please. Okay, so let me now talk about our setup academically. It's one thing to set up a college that does all the things I've been talking about, but a very important part of being a college like that is that we're able to offer accredited degrees and awards. So the awards we're offering are all accredited by TEXA, which is the accrediting body in Australia. It means, in other words, that the awards we offer, whether diploma or associate degree or bachelor's degree or graduate certificate or graduate diploma, which are our offerings at the moment, are all recognised at a university level in Australia, at a tertiary level in Australia. And that has some very exciting ramifications to it. That has been, as an aside, that has been one of the big problems with theological and Christian education in Australia in the past. That, Father was saying about what we tried to do in Sydney some years ago, and it's all well intentioned. Yes, you come along and do a class and that, but there's no recognition for it. And you invest that time, you invest that energy, and you go to the university and say, well, I did this course with the church, and they say, well, yeah. It doesn't count. And whereas, so it's really important that it's accredited, and because it's accredited, it then becomes fee-paying, of course, but also becomes subject to all the government assistance that is available for university students in any other course. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So to be recognised, to be accredited, we had to join up with a consortium. And that's what this Adelaide College Divinity thing is stamped around the place on our handbook and on our website. Adelaide College of Divinity is a small consortium. It's one of the smallest in Australia. At the moment it has 2 theological colleges who are full members, and they're both Uniting Church colleges. And there's 2 colleges that are associate members, and we're one, and there's another Uniting Church college. And in fact, one of the Uniting Church colleges is Trinity College in Brisbane. They're part of ACD. So there are other consortiums, University of Divinity. Father Andrew is studying through one of the colleges at University of Divinity, Australian College of Theology, Sydney College of Divinity, St Andrews, the Greek College, is part of SCD, Sydney College of Divinity. And what it means, these consortiums come together because theological colleges are traditionally so small that they can't get registration in their own right. So they all come together. We have a central body that overlooks all the text and regulatory stuff, all the admin stuff that needs to be done, and so on and so forth. And it is considerable, believe you me, it is considerable. And the government watches us like hawks, they really do, to make sure that we're doing the right things educationally. So the consortium looks after all that. The consortium does not tell us what to teach. The consortium has set out guidelines for the units we teach, and there are requirements for those units to be accredited. And we have to fulfil those requirements, the same as any other college in that consortium. But the content of what we teach is up to us. And of course we fill it with orthodox content. So it means that every unit we teach formally and officially meets the requirements that TEXA have demanded, but it means that the content that we teach is thoroughly orthodox, and ACD are very happy with that arrangement. They are not interfering with us in any way. So we're completely free to teach according to our tradition and the fullness of our faith. And that's really very, very important to us, of course. But we're doing that within a framework, which then means that people who sit our units and pass our units get units that are accredited and recognised. Now, that means a number of things. As I mentioned just a while ago, it means that you're eligible, if you enrol with us, for fee help. We have to charge fees. Our fees are not quite as much as you pay at most universities, but they're still hefty, like all tertiary fees in Australia, and they're all subject to fee help. So that means that the government actually lends you the money to pay your fees, and then that money is paid back through the tax system as a little levy on your tax. Once you reach a certain threshold, which is at the moment 40,000, thereabouts, isn't it? Somewhere around 40,000, might be a tad lower than 40,000. But once you start earning 40,000 or more a year, 39,000, whatever it is, then you have to start paying that back. Now, some people, of course, opt to pay it up front. Some people opt to make extra payments to get rid of it. Some people never pay it. They just let it sit there the whole of their life. There might be a few clergy in that area, because not a lot of clergy get over $40,000 if they're being supported full time by their parish. Let me tell you. So,
is it tax deductible?
No, but it's a tax.
No, I know, but if you're up front, the fee paying.
No. All it means is that your total fee will be lowered. You get a discount for paying up front, but you don't get any tax benefit from it. No.
Even if it's to do with professional development in your industry.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one, but for most people it's not tax deductible. But anyway, we can find out more about that. We can find out more about that. That's a good question, but I don't know. I really don't know. And it also means that if you're eligible, you could also be eligible for Aus study or for youth allowance. So if you're an Australian resident and if you're eligible for either of those things, Aus study or youth allowance, and certainly everyone's eligible for fee help, you can access funding from the government to pay the fees and to support you in your learning with us, just the same as any other university course. It also means, because we're accredited, that courses can be taken across institutions, and Father Gabriel mentioned this before, and this really is an exciting thing. Because most university degrees, not all, there are some that don't have the provision, but most university degrees will have some provision for you to do elective subjects. So you might be doing an engineering degree and they say you can do a couple of elective subjects as part of your engineering degree. Because they wanted to get people out of, if you're doing engineering, just doing 3 years solid engineering, never thinking about anything else. So they thought it'd be a good idea to let them go and do some history or do some botany or whatever it was they wanted to do, but do something other than engineering for a couple of units of their degree. So, because we're fully recognised, we're regulated by TEXA, you can go to a university and say, can I cross-enrol with Adelaide College of Divinity, and you come back through us then, but with Adelaide College of Divinity, and can I do my elective units with ACD? And as far as I know, thus far, we've never had anyone say no. We've had quite a few universities have already partnered with ACD under that arrangement in South Australia, Western Australia and Victoria. I don't know if any new Queensland ones, but perhaps they have been, but I don't know. So it won't be a problem with most universities. If it's fully recognised and accredited and it's regulated by TEXA, they won't have a problem with that. So that means that if you're in a course, and some of you know if you're doing something in the social sciences or those areas, psychology, you're going to be bombarded with a lot of, critical theory and post-Marxist analysis and ideology, and it can be pretty tough for a Christian, You can be there really going through some angst as a Christian believer, and trying to negotiate those areas. And so here you can actually come to us and have the encouragement of being part of us and at least having some Christian input into your university degree. So I think it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And it also means for those who say, well, look, I don't really want to do a full diploma or even a bachelor's degree or whatever with you, but I would like to do a couple of subjects and get credit for it. You have that option. And then the other good thing about being part of ACD is that you have access to a major theological library. There's 35,000 volumes in the stacks. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of volumes in e-volumes. There's access to all the major journals electronically. So that means, again, remotely, you can access the whole lot. If you need a book in hard copy, they'll post it to you. So it's pretty good being part of ACD from our point of view, because we have all these resources and facilities that would take us 50 years to get together, in terms of finances and logistics and everything else. So have the next slide, I think. Well, perhaps I'll just say, if you just go back, that last point is very important, and by now I think you've picked up on it, but the association with ACD is academic, it's educational, it's not ecumenical. ACD, because there's a lot of uniting church influence around it, people like throwing around the ecumenical word all the time, but we have made it very, very clear. We're not in an ecumenical partnership. We're in an academic educational partnership. And so there's no ecclesial connection. There's not a partnership between the Russian Church and ACD. It's partnerships between SCMOI and ACD, and it's an educational partnership. And I just want to make that clear, because you know what our church is like, and sometimes people get hold of the wrong end of the stick, and if they go to the ACD website, they might think, Father Peter's taken us down some terrible ecumenical path. Well, I'm not, and we're not going that way at all. ACD have been really good. They've bent over backwards to accommodate us. We had a learning and teaching day yesterday. Four of our faculty were there, and we joined with some of the ACD people in the afternoon. We organised it. It was a wonderful day, and they really just bent over backwards to make us feel welcome, to be involved, to support us, to help us get things going. So thus far, all I can say is full marks, even though theologically I'm miles away from them. In terms of collegiality, educational cooperation and so on, they have been wonderfully, wonderfully supportive. Right, so what do we offer? The basic degree structure is a ministry award, and that sort of sounds a bit funny when you first hear it, because it's not sort of, I wouldn't have thought of going and doing a Bachelor of Ministry, you might say. But in a sense, you could think of the BMin, it's like a Christian BA, because it's much, much broader than the traditional theology degree. And if you turn in the handbooks you've been given to page 19, you'll see there the start of the course templates. Now, ACD have all sorts of units floating around the place, and we have made a selection of what we want to have on offer and what will be on offer to our students. I should just explain, you'll see that in all the undergraduate courses we talk about clergy track and faith and life track. I mentioned that earlier. And so clergy track is the pathway for those who are studying for ordination. Doing so with the blessing of Vladika or with their ruling bishop if they're from another jurisdiction. Faith and life track is for lay people coming in, lay adult learners, young or old learners who want to come and want to do these courses. They don't come with an episcopal blessing, but we'll certainly be looking to them to be supportive and to be part and to be in line with the ethos of the college. But I have to say, the college, as far as I'm concerned, it's open to anyone who wants to come and learn. If anyone genuinely wants to come and learn, even if they're not Orthodox, and they want to come do Orthodox studies with us, it's great. That's part of our missionary outreach as well. If we can be training people educationally in the Orthodox faith, why not? and perhaps what will happen to them is what happened to me. Who knows? That's in the hands of God. So you'll see that we start off with a diploma course. So it's really a 3-year structure: diploma, associate degree, Bachelor of Ministry. The diploma is 1 year full-time or equivalent part-time. The associate degree is 2 years full-time or equivalent part-time. And the bachelor's degree is 3 years full-time or equivalent part-time. But the beauty of the structure is it is nicely incremental. So you can, for instance, say, I'm going to enrol for the diploma, and then after you've done the diploma, say, well, actually, I'd like to go on. And so they'll just roll over into the associate degree or the bachelor's degree. Alternatively, you can start off and say, I'm going to do the bachelor's degree, and then, things happen in life, and perhaps you can't finish that for some reason. Well, you can still exit if you've got the units at 1 year, or you've got the units at 2 years full-time equivalent, you can exit with the award. So it's not wasted. Now, for those, the older ones here, and it still is the case in many, many universities in Australia, if you enrol, say, for a bachelor's degree, well, in my day, when you did a BA, it was all different. Then we had terms and not semesters and all that sort of thing, but you did 9 subjects over 3 years. And if you did 8 subjects and then you didn't do the last one, tough. You didn't get your degree. Which is fair enough in one way, I suppose, but it's a bit rough if you put in 2 3/4 years and you've got absolutely nothing to show for it at the end of that time. And the Indians, the Indians used to have this lovely thing called BA failed. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And sometimes you see on resumes for Indian people applying for jobs, or someone would write an article and they'd put BA after their name and in brackets failed. So they didn't quite make it. But we never had a failed degree in Australia or anywhere else in the English-speaking world that I know of. But this way it means that, okay, if you were in that situation, you would exit with at least an associate degree. So it's really good from that point of view. It also means, and we haven't yet worked this out, but it also means that we hope that students will be able to come and do a year award with us or a 2-year award with us, and then go on to somewhere else to complete at a higher level. We still have to negotiate that with Jordanville and other bodies overseas, but that would be our expectation, and I think it's a reasonable expectation. So you can come and do a 2-year associate degree with us and then go to Jordanville and do another 2 years and complete their main degree. But we haven't negotiated that with them yet.
I think if you've got the Metropolitan as the chairman of this, that should work.
Well, we're hoping that counts in our favour, yes. So Jordanville will have a mind of their own. We'll see that the awards are made up of units. All these units are 1 semester long. Nearly all of them, except for some of the field educational units, carry a weight of 4.5 points. For the diploma course, if you come in, there are 5 core subjects everybody will do. We can't change that. That's an ACD requirement. But we have been able to shift a couple of little things around there. And it includes a subject that we haven't yet had approved, but we will have approved hopefully this coming semester or the following semester, which is called the Orthodox Diaconate, which is an alternative topic for those men who are studying specifically for the permanent diaconate. But you'll see on one side, if you're in the clergy track, you do the 5, this is the diploma on page 19, you do the 5, and then the 3 subjects that you basically have to do. If you're on the faith and life track, so you're not training for ordination as such, then you have a choice of a whole string of electives. And that means you can follow up on things like media, youth work, communication, culture, studies, apologetics, all sorts of things. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You don't have to just be lumped into doing the more narrowly defined courses that we require our ordination candidates to do. But you can go and do some other stuff as well. And so it goes on through the whole 3 years. At present, we are, in this semester, we will actually have at least 1 student studying full-time. But we can do that with him because he's coming with a fairly high-level background. and he's going to do some guided reading subjects, so we can take them up to, and that's another option for some students, guided reading subjects. So an area in which they're interested, we can actually set up a guided reading course for them. And that'll give him 3 subjects. That gives him 75% of a full-time load, which means he's then eligible for study. So, but for most of our students, this semester at least, it's just part-time. And it may be a couple more semesters before we really got the people in place to offer a full-time program. This coming semester, if you go on in the handbook to page 27, you'll see there we start outlining some of the units, and you'll see at the bottom of page 27 there's a unit called Min's 1201, Interpreting the New Testament. That's one of the units we're going to be doing this semester, and I'm going to be teaching that. And then at the top of page 28 there's a unit called Min's 1304, Introduction to Christian Thought, and that will be offered this semester as well, and that will be taught by Father Nicholas Karipov from the Melbourne Cathedral. And also the equivalent postgraduate level subjects will be taught as well. So students can come in and do New Testament introduction to Christian thought, which is basically introduction to theology. You can come in and do those whether at both an undergraduate level or a postgraduate level. We'll talk a bit about that in a moment. Well, in fact, I'll talk about it now. We have 2 postgraduate awards which we can teach at the moment. One's the postgraduate certificate in ministry, and the other is the postgraduate diploma in ministry. Now, at this point, we don't just talk about clergy track and faith and life track. We talk about those who are qualified to come in and do postgraduate ministry studies. There's a little bit of a snag here in that you need to be able to demonstrate a ministry involvement. But in our situation, for instance, a tonsured reader would be eligible. If you're involved in some social work program, a youth work program, if you're on the parish council, if you are engaged perhaps the old people's home or, with some community body or something like that. One student at this time who certainly will be doing the graduate diploma in ministry. The graduate diploma is not for everyone. Now, in fact, our student who's going to do 3 units, he could very easily get into the graduate diploma, but he actually wants to do the first year diploma because he wants that bridging qualification. He wants to do that basic Orthodox theology, belief, study stuff. And I think that's a great option for him, and that's a very good option for lots of people. So the grad diploma is not there for everybody, but there are some people who will be looking to go on to higher degree work, and the graduate diploma is a pathway to that. At the moment, it's a pathway to the Master of Ministries Award or to the Doctor of Ministry Award. But another thing, and again I'm foreshadowing and I can't promise at this stage, but we are hopeful that within a year or 2 we will have an agreement with a Russian university, and I won't say which one at the moment, but we have had some very preliminary discussions, where we will actually be able to offer an MTH and a PhD from Russia. We would prefer to look to Russia, to an Orthodox university in Russia that can offer a Master's Award and a postgrad and a Doctoral Award. And although that won't be subject to fee help, we would hope that the favourable difference in terms of exchange would mean that the cost for Australian students would be fairly low. So they'd be able to afford to pay those fees without fee help. And would do the Masters, at least do most of that work with us in Australia, but there might be a small residential requirement. You might have to go and spend 3 months in Russia or something like that at the university. But do it in English and do it in Australia, but be awarded the degree through the Russian university. Now again, I don't want to be irresponsible, but I think it's a fair thing to say. It's a fair expectation we'll be able to achieve this, but we haven't achieved it yet. So I can't promise that we're going to achieve it. But that's what we're certainly looking to do. And I think that'd be very, very exciting if we can do that. And that will open up all sorts of visitors for us. So, let's move on. What does it cost? Well, as I said, because it's an accredited award, and we have to have fees, we have to pay people, we have to run the place, and it does all take money, unfortunately. That's one of the reasons we haven't done it for many, many years, and one of the reasons many other people haven't done it, because it costs a lot of money to do this sort of thing. At the moment, to be honest, we're running on the smell of an eau de rag, and if we're going to be sustainable, we have to get money in, especially through fees and hopefully too through donations through the faithful of the church. One undergraduate unit is $1,665 at the moment. And then the postgraduate units are slightly higher. We also have an audit option. If you want to come and just sit in on the class and not actually do it for credit, you can do it that way too. You can just audit the class. You won't be assessed, you won't get any certificate, you won't get any award, but you'll have the benefit of sitting in on the class and gaining the learning. And that's only a mere $300. However, if you do the audit class and then say, oh, I'd like to actually do the diploma, or I'd like to do the bachelor's degree or whatever, you have to do that class again because you've got no credit for it, you see. But you are very welcome to come and do it on the audit basis. We don't set the fees, ACD sets them. As I say, I think they're reasonable fees compared with what you would pay for, say, a BA in most universities. It's still lower, so it's not too bad. Yeah, next one. Okay, yes, thank you. So, a few points about fee. I always forget this bit on the slides. Yes. So, just to make these points, all tax and accredited courses attract fees, and you're not paying any more with us than you pay for other Australian university units. I've mentioned that they're necessary for sustainability. International students pay the same fees. We don't, ACD, unlike University of Divinity, does not have Kairos accreditation for overseas students. It's not, is it Kairos? No, I'm pronouncing it probably on you know what I mean, don't you? Yeah. So, in other words, we can't at the moment bring a student from Russia to Australia to study with us under the Australian current rules. University of Divinity could, we can't. However, a student could be in Russia and study with us. So that's the difference. So provided the student, he or she stays in Russia, that's fine. But we can't bring them to Australia to study with us because we don't have that registration. But perhaps that'll change down the track too. So international students pay the same fees, and as I've mentioned, all students are eligible for fee help. So, can we go to the website, please? And now you'll find our website. The address is in the front of the handbook, and please do have a look at the website. Just close on that. Okay. So just while Father's organising that, there's a two-step enrolment process. We want you first of all to enrol with us. We want you to join us as a student. And that's very simple, and I'll show you. There's a very simple form on the website. We just ask you to fill that in and send it to us. And we'll invoice you for $25 just to cover the admin cost of processing that. And that, once that's approved, you'll be our student. You'll belong to SCMOI. And we just feel it's a rather important little step for us to take. It's a bit of a gatekeeping process for us. And then once you're registered with us, we'll just send you an email and say you're registered with us, and you go to the ACD site. And we'll probably have some more links on our website up soon. You go straight to the ACD site and you'll actually enrol online with ACD directly. And when you enrol online, you'll see that our college name is one of the options, and you'll push all those buttons. And we can help you through that process. So if we just go across to student information, and then apply now. And then if you just see the application forms, there's 2 application forms. Go to the first one there, and you see how simple it is. So if you scroll down, it's just the personal details. We just want to know what the highest educational level award is you've obtained. Obviously, if you haven't got high school, if you haven't finished high school, that can be negotiated. So don't say, oh, I didn't finish high school, so I can't do a tertiary course. We can negotiate that. There can be recognition for prior learning, for credit, and we can also negotiate a mature entry, to give it a short title, mature age entry for students who haven't finished high school. But if you didn't finish high school but you've done a TAFE award or something like that, that will get you over the line. So there are different ways of getting you over the line. And there's always provisional enrolment, which means that for the first 4 units you'll be enrolled provisionally, and then provided you achieve, you pass the units, you do the work and you're okay on those 4 units, your enrolment will be confirmed. But if you struggle with those 4 units, you can't really do them, then we might say, well, perhaps you're not quite ready for this course just yet. So you scroll down, yes, and then we want to know if you're a clergy person or another person, and just denominational affiliation, and then what you want to do, and if you know what it is you want to do. And then there's a bit of clergy track endorsement there for those who are in the clergy track, and then the declaration. So it's a very, very simple form. And it takes all the 5 minutes to fill it in, if that. And you can even sign it electronically if you want. Otherwise you've got to print it off and sign it and scan it, which is a bit of a pain. Or you can post it to us. So you can do it either way. But
how does it work these days with indicating whether you're male or female?
Well, in our institute there are only 2 genders, so that's all I can tell you. we don't have any other categories.
No, I didn't see that. Was there a male, female?
I don't think we would put it in there, no.
But you would need one because...
Well, you've got a
title. There's a title, yes.
What's the...
Yeah.
We can work it out.
You have another title. If you have another title, well...
I'm just saying some names you can't tell from the name whether it's male or female.
But we also, you see, the other thing is if we don't know the person, there's actually in the instructions at the top, we do actually reserve the right to have a little interview with them first. So it's not about stopping people. We're not about... it's not about stopping anyone from coming. As I said before, I'm more than happy if people come from non-Orthodox backgrounds and other backgrounds want to come, and if they're bona fide, if they have a genuine interest. But it is also being just a little bit wary about situations where someone may come and it's not going to be a good fit for the college, and they're not perhaps really coming for quite the right reasons. And yeah, we just need to have a little bit of a say over that. So, and on the website you'll find all the information that's in the handbook and a bit more. You'll find the timetable for semester 2. Oh, I should have said about delivery. I meant to put a slide in about delivery. At the moment, because we're in the early stages, all of our online delivery is going to be pretty well synchronous. So in other words, on the timetable you'll see there are classes running through Tuesday through to Thursday each week, and if you're enrolled you're expected to attend those classes, but you'll be attending online. So in real time the class will be taking place, and the students will be scattered around the country, and you'll be with the course coordinator doing the course. And there will be some other material from time to time, that the course coordinator may say, well, here's a video, so instead of meeting this week, I'd like you to look at this video on this particular topic and write some report or something, whatever, and we'll talk about that next week. So that sort of thing happens, but we hope down the track it'll be a bit more asynchronous, so there'll be more and more resources going up over the years that will enable students to say, well, I don't have to attend all the lectures, I can do a bit more in my own time. But that sounds a great idea, and it is a great idea, but I can tell you it takes an enormous amount of work to get to that point. And we just don't have the people at the moment to do all the work that's required to make that happen. And it's going to take us a little while. So at the moment it's pretty synchronous. We do expect you to attend lectures, and every student gets we give every student, as part of ACD policy, every student gets like a little learning contract, and we lay out exactly what is expected of each student, and you agree to that. If you don't agree to it, well, that's okay, but you don't do the course. But, you know, there's a basic agreement between us about what we expect you to attend. And obviously we understand people get sick and things happen in life and you can't always be there. But there'll be a minimum number of classes you're expected to be at. And the same with assessment. All the courses will have at least 3 assessment points in them. Some will have more. All our courses are continuous assessment courses. We do have the option of having exams, but thus far we haven't decided to have any exams for anything. So it will be a continuous assessment process. And that could be an essay, a quiz, a report, a little project. It could be all sorts of things. So go out and do something practical, you know, write up a journal about it. It could be that. So it's not just simply traditional write me an essay type assessment. Well, that'll be part of it, of course. We want you to be able to write. We want you to be able to read and think and write. We're not in any way discounting that. But we're trying to have the assessment varied, and we want, you know, for those of you who know the learning and teaching language, we want our assessment to be both formative and summative. So we want our assessment to be part of your learning process. Not just simply a test that you go through to get a mark. Yeah. In fact, we were asked a very interesting question yesterday at the Learning and Teaching Day, and that is, what does 50% mean? And you think about it, what does it mean? So if you get 49, you're out. If you get 51, you're in. You know, it's a bit weird, isn't it, when you start thinking about it? So anyway, that got us all thinking deeply and philosophically about what we're doing with marks. But at the moment we have the marks, don't worry.
Isn't that why many universities have the passing seat mark?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, but we don't have one. So I can't do that for you, no. But we in fact, you'll find in the handbook the grading system is listed. But in fact, I think it was actually the fact that we listed it that raised the question from one of our presenters yesterday: is, you know, what does it mean? And we're just following what the ACD procedure is, but it is an interesting point. What do we? If I said to you, you're passing it if you get 90% right, you know, why not? You know, what does 50% mean you pass and 49% means you don't? So it's an interesting question. We're not here to discuss that philosophically. Do you have any questions for me? Anything I can help you with?
What's the cut-off for enrolments? Okay,
we'd like you to. We really need you to get in touch with us by the 2nd of July at SCMOI. ACD, we've still got a couple of weeks after that. Now, I should say too, with ACD, you understand, of course, when you enrol, there is a census date, which means that if you withdraw before the census date, there's no fee charged. So it's like university. So if you sign up and then you get a couple, you know, a few weeks into the course and say, well, I really don't like this, you can withdraw without penalty. In fact, if you go to the under the student information file, and there should be the timetable and semester 2 units here. And you'll see there the census date is Friday the 31st of August, and you'll see Wednesday the 11th of July is the last day for new admissions to ACD. So if you are interested, and I hope some of you are, please let me know as soon as you can so we can start getting the ball rolling Because it takes a bit of a while to get things together when you're enrolling for the first time, you know, because you may have to get some transcripts or some information or whatever. So don't leave it to the last minute. There might be a little bit of flexibility, but don't count on too much flexibility. And we don't want to lose you because, you know, ACD says, well, sorry, it's too late. Yeah.
Just been reading that biblical Greek is offered as
Yes.
a course. Could you talk a little bit about that? And
Well, in Greek or
with regards to how it's taught, because that is a linguistic
Yeah.
degree.
We have, in fact, all we want. The diploma students do not have a requirement to do Greek, so we understand that language can be a challenge for some people. And I mean, funnily enough, even though I went back to the university to do Hebrew and Syriac and all that sort of thing, I've always struggled with languages. It's always been hard for me. I've never learned Russian. To my shame, I've never learned it. I've never learned Slavonic. I sort of dug in my heels a bit at first. I wanted to sort of be Australian, you know, and I'm really sort of sorry in a way now. 20 years ago I'd been more serious about it. Anyway, that's another story. But the point I'm trying to make is that it is hard work learning a language. We all know that. Russian is particularly hard work, I must say. But if you're going on to do the associate degree or the bachelor's degree, yes, we require you to have Greek. You're going to do a semester of Greek. You also, if you're in the clergy track, you'll also do a semester of Church Slavonic. Now, after that, because we don't have the space in the current ACD setup to put in extra language units, you will then be doing exegesis in those languages within other subjects. So in the New Testament subject and in the Old Testament Pentateuch subject, you'll be doing Greek exegesis. From the Septuagint, from the Pentateuch, and from the Greek New Testament. So, and you'll find in the unit descriptions that there's an explanation of that. But there'll be a little bit of flexibility there because some students will come in without Greek into some of those subjects, and we won't expect them obviously to do Greek or to know Greek. And the lower the level of the subject, the easier the Greek will be. But there's not much point giving you a semester of Greek in a 3-year degree and then you don't get to touch it again in the whole time. You soon forget it, you know. So it's better to give you a semester of Greek, and we'll probably do that next year. Will be the first offering, and we'll have a residential 1-week study school for everybody next week in the middle of the year, which we will expect everyone to be at. And so we can also have some community life together and pray together and go to church together and study together. Do have a week of intensive lectures, and Greek will probably be part of that process next year. And if you know Reader Ryan Strickler, who's just about to be Dr. Ryan Strickler, we hope, Ryan will probably be teaching the Greek course.
What level of competence do you expect people to achieve after one semester of Greek?
Well, if after one semester of Greek, not a great deal. I expect them to know how to look up a lexicon and do a little, and have a little basic understanding of the structure of the Greek language. At least be able to read a Greek text, even though they don't understand it. But that's why I say, you see, then we bring it into, so in New Testament, when you do the Synoptic Gospels and 1 or 2 Corinthians and Johannine Corpus and all those sorts of things, those students who have Greek will be doing some of their work in Greek there. They'll be doing exegesis. So my concern really is to give people the skill. It's always been a problem in theological education that the theological college I went to, we did 3 years Greek, 3 years Hebrew. We did 2 hours of Greek and 2 hours of Hebrew every week, both in introductory and then in exegesis for years 2 and years 3. Now that's a lot. And yet I would say 90% of the men who left that college would hardly know any Greek or Hebrew now. Because the thing is, you lose it if you don't keep it going, and if it is a struggle, then, you know, So I would rather give people the skills rather than those students who are linguistically gifted will go on and do something with it. You know, they'll take some other courses or whatever. But the students who are not linguistically gifted, I want to give them the skills at least, well, I can look up a lexicon and I know that, oh, because it's aorist, you know, that means something, or, you know, it's passive, it's in the passive voice or whatever, or it's active voice, I can tell that there's a difference in meaning because of that. Now, it may not go much beyond that, but that's handy if you're preparing a sermon or you're thinking about a text, or even if you're just reading the scriptures each day for yourself and pick up your Greek New Testament and try to read a little bit in the Greek each day. It's handy. And the same as Slavonic, you know, well, obviously we have a different requirement there because we want our clergy to have be competent to the extent that they can liturgically use the language, unlike myself. So I'm not a good model in that department, I'm afraid. But and we need a teacher in Slavonic, so if anyone has any suggestions, please let me know. Yes, sir.
When did the lectures usually get up?
When do the lectures get?
Yeah, when are lectures every day between Thursday?
Tuesdays to Thursdays during semester. In the evening. They're all going to be evening for semester 2. Now, hopefully, semester 1, semester 2 next year, once we understand a bit more about where our students are at, we might be able to shift a couple of those subjects into the daytime. But at the moment, they're all evening because I have no idea. You see, we haven't known who's going to enrol, and I don't know if I put things in the daytime. You say, but I'm at work all day, I can't get to it. Then obviously that's self-defeating for us. So we've put them in the evening. So if you're not working, that's okay because you can sleep a bit longer during the day. But if you are working, at least you get to class. We'll keep it between Tuesdays and Thursdays, so at least you'll always have the Monday off, you'll always have the Friday off. Because otherwise it's too much. You know, people got to live as well, we understand that. And first year units are 3 hours contact time per week. So that means that in the current timetable there's a 2-hour class and a 1-hour class. The 1-hour class will probably be more like a seminar tutorial type class. The 2-hour class will be a lecture type, going through some of the basic stuff. But as I say, because we're online, we can use lots of other online add-ons as well. You know, we can show videos and use other media online. So it's not just talking heads. And we want to get back to that basic principle of being engaged. So our teachers are already being told it's not a case of you sitting there and simply spouting forth, you know, the guru on the stage, or the sage on the stage, you know. It's not about that. It's about conducting classes in such a way that students are taking responsibility for their learning and students are being engaged in how they learn, and the teacher and the student together are learning in effect. So it's going to take us a while to get this all, you know, to where we want it, but that's what we're trying to do. So we don't expect anyone to sit through 2 hours of someone just talking at them. That would be impossible. And I should also say there's, like university, there's a mid-semester break. So we do 6 weeks, have a break, then another 6 weeks. So have a 2-week break in the middle, which is good because we can do our bush bash in September. I can still go on bush bash.
Regarding this course,